Gostaria de convidar a tomarem seus assentos. Professor Ann Tarca, could you hear us?
Hello, yes, I can hear you.
Great, you can see and hear you. Thank you so much. So we will have the first presentation of this event. We have the proud to stay with Professor Ann Tarca. And Professor Ann Tarca, welcome to our Congress, and thank you so much for your kind acceptance to participate as a keynote speaker. We know that the time zone in Australia at this moment is not so comfortable. And I'm going to read a briefing of your background just to formalize your introduction to our audience. Professor Ann Tarca joined the International Accounting Standards Board in 2017 and was reappointed to serve a second term in 2022. She joined the IASB from the University of Western Australia's Business School, where she was an account teacher at research since 1996 and a professor since 2011. Professor Tarca served as a member of the Australian Accounting Standards Board from 14 to 17 and was a research director of the IASB from February 2017. She was an academic fellow of the FRS Foundation from 2011 to 12. She has authored a textbook on accounting and written a wide range of research papers related to FRS standards, for which she has received many awards. Professor Tarca is an active member of the international accounting academic community, having served on several boards and committees. She qualified as a chartered accountant in 1985 and has a PhD in accounting from the University of Western Australia. We also invited to compose and moderate this panel Professor Raquel Sarkis. Raquel is a professor at the Accounting and Actuarial Department at the University of São Paulo. She has several academic papers published regarding financial accounting and international accounting. Professor Raquel also was awarded several academic distinctions, such as Best PhD Dissertation in 2020 and Best Master of Science Thesis in 2015, for instance. Professor Raquel also has a project approved in the research program informed the IASB standard setting process, developed by the International Association of Account Education Research in partnership with KPMG and the IASB. Professor Anna, please, the floor is yours. Thank you so much.
Thank you for the introduction. Can you hear me clearly?
Yes.
Can you hear okay?
Yes, we can.
Okay, you'll stop me if you can't hear me. I'll share the slides. Thank you very much for this opportunity to address your meeting. I hope you are enjoying meeting together, and I hope it's a productive time sharing about research. Thank you for the invitation to speak with you today. And my topic is talking about the IASB and how we engage with academic research. So this is about the work of the IASB and how we use academic research in that process. So I'd like to talk about some opportunities and benefits for academics to be involved. In my talk, I'd like to speak first about how the IASB uses research and then also talk about our post-implementation reviews. In the next section of my presentation, I'll talk about some projects that we have been undertaking and some related research opportunities. And finally, I'll conclude to tell you some more about some activities that we've been involved in with academics related to research. So first up, the IASB and research. The thing to note first is that the IASB is required to undertake evidence-based standard setting. That is a requirement by the trustees. So we have to collect that evidence and we use a range of sources, and I've listed them there on the screen. So you'll know we do lots of outreach with stakeholders. We meet with our own consultative groups and national standard setters. We have research taken by staff. We also make use of focus groups and field testing when we have new proposals. We look at the studies and research of other national standard setters, of security market regulators, and also accounting firms. And finally, external research, academic research. It's really important to us for a couple of reasons. Academics have got the skills and experience to do high quality research. They are also able to be independent in the way they approach the projects and the way they deal with data. So you'll find that there are many references to academic research in our work, and you'll find that it is something that the board discusses and looks for, because it can help us as we do what we're required, which is to do evidence-based standard setting. The link on this slide is a link to the academic page on the IFRS Foundation website. If you're not familiar with it, have a look at it after this meeting, and you'll see where we load up many resources that are relevant to academics. We make use of evidence because we are trying to determine what is the problem to be solved. So the evidence can help us do that. We look at the nature of the problem, the extent, its pervasiveness, how important it is, and what is the impact. It's very common for us to have an academic literature review as part of a project and as a part of a PIR, which is a post-implementation review. So on our website, you can find the literature reviews that staff have prepared on primary financial statements, goodwill and impairment, and extractive activities, just to name 3 projects. We have completed post-implementation reviews for IFRS 8 on segments, IFRS 13 fair value measurement, and IFRS 3 business combinations. And we had literature reviews prepared as part of all those. The post-implementation reviews that are currently underway or pending relate to the 3 big new standards. That's IFRS 9, IFRS 15, and IFRS 16, or leases, revenue, and financial instruments. So there are research opportunities in relation to a post-implementation review, and we are really keen to hear about research people have got that can feed into the post-implementation review process. As we all know, new standards can bring many changes to IFRS accounting requirements. So we're looking for studies that give us evidence about the impact of the changes. These studies may use a range of methods because there is different sorts of evidence, and each part of that evidence could be relevant. Many studies look at pre and post application of the new standard, so what has changed in accounting practice and what can be observed. Researchers can look at the financial impacts of the changes. They can also look at market effects, and by that I mean what the effects are for participants in capital markets. Researchers also look at market outcomes, and that might be things to do with prices or returns. What have they changed? How have those things changed as a result of a new standard? So there's lots to look at in terms of a post-implementation review. This slide gives you some information about the one that we're currently involved in, and that's IFRS 9, classification and measurement. IFRS 9 will have 3 post-implementation reviews, or rather, the post-implementation review of IFRS 9 will be done in 3 stages. This is the first stage, classification and measurement. So we're well underway with this one. We issued a request for information. We identified, as a result of that, we identified several topics that people are interested in, and we're investigating those. So the board is currently considering a number of board papers that the staff are bringing, and we're evaluating the information. As we continue, we'll look at additional topics, and you can see them listed there at the bottom of the slide. So the research opportunities in relation to IFRS 9 are looking ahead to other stages of the post-implementation review. So that would be impairment, having a look at the expected credit losses, ECL model, and also IFRS 9, the general hedge model, the general model in IFRS 9 for looking at hedge accounting. So they're areas where we are still seeking research. And if you have any research in those areas, please let us know. And I'll explain how to let us know shortly. But what are the benefits for academics to get involved in research? Doing research that is relevant to standard setting means that you are doing policy relevant research. So you can explain the contribution of your work and also show your impact. So this area of research enables people to develop research skills. They can use the established methods, or they can work on developing new research tools. They're able to contribute to a strong stream of international research. And I've put one example on the screen. We're joined today by Raquel, and she's been involved in various projects that have been relevant to standard setting. And these, with her team members, these are two of the papers. This slide, it's here and it's at the end of the slide deck. Lots of links for things that you can follow up on, but I just want to mention them now as examples of the way the IASB gets involved with academics and research. Firstly, we have an annual research forum. We get involved with academics through special issues in journals. We also have calls for research directly. We're working presently with national standard setters on research about materiality. And you can find all this information on the website in our webpage. You can also email us directly to Anna Simpson, who is IASB staff, and she has academic background. And we'll also have a submission portal for the future. So what I'd like to do now is highlight a few projects where I can talk about some research opportunities. So firstly, let's just have a look at all the projects we have. So we're very busy people. We have 2 slides here talking about the work we're doing. So we have first research projects, and then after we have done work on research projects, we decide whether or not to take them to standard setting. So as you can see, there are 8 projects here under research projects. They're generally earlier stage than the standard setting projects. So generally, if you were looking for research opportunities, you would look for the earlier stage projects. In terms of standard setting projects, there are 7 listed here. These are well advanced in their work. If you have existing projects, existing research on these topics, please let us know. But if you're looking to develop new research work, you need to evaluate the project and see where the opportunities come. And I'll explain a few opportunities and make it clear what I mean. We also have some narrow scope projects, and they're probably less suited to research. And we've also just completed our 3rd agenda consultation, and I'd like to talk about that in the time available to me today. So let's move along. In terms of research projects, examples of research opportunities. We have a project that's still in the research phase for business combinations under common control. So you may know that we have IFRS 3 for business combinations, but the business combinations under common control are excluded from that standard. And in our 2nd agenda consultation, people asked us to look at this area. And that's what we've been doing. It's a really interesting area of work because we have to decide when to use the acquisition method and when to use a book value method. So we are progressing in our discussions. But what we found in this area, for example, is that the research has really been quite limited. We've done a literature review and it's really been quite limited. And I think one of the reasons has been that it's quite hard to get the data in this area. So one of the things to think about is not just what the topics are and what the questions are. You need to look at where we are in the project to see if you're able to contribute or not, and you need to look at what the existing research field is like. And then you can assess whether you can develop research questions and indeed whether data is available. Another project that I would like to mention as one that we have spent considerable time on in the last years, and that's extractive activities. And the direction of this project will be about disclosure, and it will be about improving disclosure. Now, disclosure is always an important area for us. All standards have disclosure requirements, and getting those disclosure requirements right and getting something that works in practice is really important. And so this is an area where academics can really assist us. If somebody wanted to work in this area of extractive activities, I just point you to the project page on the IFRS Foundation website, and this now would be in relation to disclosure. We are moving quite forward on this project, so whether there's time for new work, I'm not sure. But if there is existing work in this area that's relevant, please let us know. Another project that has been going following on from the post-implementation review of IFRS 3 is relation to goodwill and impairment. We got a lot of feedback as a result of the post-implementation review, and we decided to look at some specific issues in relation to goodwill and impairment. An area where we'd like more research is in relation to our decisions about requiring more disclosures on post-acquisition performance. So, as I just said in the previous slide, research about disclosure is really helpful to us and really relevant and really useful. We're making decisions in Q4 of 2022 on this project, so there isn't time for new work. But although there's a lot of work around goodwill and issues to do with goodwill, we have not found so much relevant research on the topic we're interested in, which is to do with the disclosure of post-acquisition performance. There were some projects on the research pipeline that are quite topical, quite close to decisions, and so perhaps not available for new research projects. But I just highlight to you the sorts of things we look for in projects. Now, if we turn to projects which are on the standard setting agenda, so these are projects that can be even more developed and then perhaps not open for, medium-term research projects. However, some of these projects deal with really cross-cutting issues, very pervasive issues, and this one here is an example. So in this project, we looked at the extent to which we could develop and write disclosure requirements in standards in a different way. The project is part of our disclosure initiative projects, and what we did in this project was develop a new way of formulating disclosure requirements, and we got quite a lot of support for our approach when we consulted on it. The feedback on the actual approach, what we were proposing, was more mixed. What we were proposing was that we would use disclosure objectives, and they would be the focus, that entities would disclose information to meet disclosure objectives and to meet user information needs. We hope that this project would provide more material information. It would provide more focus on information that is useful and less boilerplate information. As I said, we had very mixed feedback on this, and the board needs to decide on a way ahead. But it's an illustration of issues that are important, pervasive, cross-cutting. So the issues of materiality and how people determine what's material, and how standard setters deal with the issue of materiality. It touches on the issues of using checklists for disclosure requirements. It touches on the issue of compliance, the extent to which entities comply with disclosure requirements. These are perennial issues for researchers, and they will continue to be important. Another project that is on standard setting agenda but is currently being reconsidered is the Management Commentary Project. This is a really important project for us. It's about revising the practice statement number 1. Done a lot of work on creating a framework for narrative reporting that focuses on the needs of capital market participants. The reason that we are, which I'm mentioning now, that we are deciding direction on this is because of the developments with the IASB. That's our sister board, the International Sustainability Standards Board, that has had its first meeting in July in Frankfurt. And many stakeholders have told us that management commentary is an example of a project where the two boards should work together. That's the IASB and the ISSB should work together on management commentary. So we need to decide the way forward on this project. So we have completed our, we've produced our ED, we've received feedback, we've looked at the feedback, and now we have to decide the way forward. So there's always research that's of interest around narrative reporting. There is so much that we don't know about the intersection between narrative reporting and financial reporting, and many issues that are raised in the management commentary ED are issues that researchers could investigate if they're interested in narrative reporting and non-financial reporting. Third project I'd like to mention is primary financial statements. Incredibly important project for us. It is well advanced in the work. We have consulted. The board is currently reviewing all the information it's receiving. It's an important project because it will bring structure to financial statements. There'll be defined subtotals. There'll be strengthened requirements for disaggregation. There will be disclosures about management performance area measures. All of those areas are interesting for research. So this is an example of a project where people can get ready for their research for considering before and after effects of this new standard. It will affect everybody using IFRS financial statements. This will be an addition to IAS 1, and many specific proposals are made. They will bring about change. We will be greatly interested in knowing whether what we're proposing achieves its objectives and whether the changes that are brought about are beneficial. So some really interesting areas of research here. So it's about presentation, and there'll be opportunities to investigate the impact of this new IFRS accounting standard. Now, I'd also like to mention IFRS for SMEs. So this is the standalone standard that we have, and it is for small and medium-sized enterprises. So IFRS for SMEs is currently being revised, and a new standard will be issued. So we're about to issue the exposure draft for the new standard, and we'll be very keen to have any comments that you might have if you're already researching in this area or if you're working with clients that are using the IFRS for SMEs. So please comment on our exposure draft if that you have relevant information. What this standard does is summarise the approach we took to revising the IFRS for SMEs standard. So we chose to take an alignment approach where we considered updating the standard for changes in IFRS accounting standards. Now, that approach has all sorts of aspects to it that could be usefully investigated. So we're going to make changes. So we're interested in the relevance of the changes. Do users of the information get good information from the changes? Do they get better information? How have they been affected by these changes? We made various simplifications as we did these revisions. Any information and research on this standard that can investigate the way the simplifications are used and the benefits that they give would be interest. And the third pillar of how we approach this was always looking for faithful representation. So does the outcome faithfully represent the underlying economics? So they're all areas that can be researched, and there's a lot we don't know about the preparers and the users of the IFRS for SMEs. So interested in research in that area as well. Okay. I want to talk now a little bit about the last area of my presentation, and that's strategy and governance. And there's a couple of things I want to talk about here. I want to talk about our third agenda consultation, and why this is so important for research is because this is the setting of the projects that the board will work on in the future. And one of the things that the researchers and academics want to know is what is coming down the pipeline into the future. And it's knowing about the future means you can plan now for research that will become relevant in 3 to 5 years. And I know that research can take some years to get up and get going and to be carried out with the rigor that you would like to. So the agenda consultations are really important. You can see from this slide, we were busy working on it through 2021 and then also in 2022. We've published our feedback statement and we have identified the projects we're going to work on in the future. So I'll show you those. So the agenda consultation is the process by where we consult widely with stakeholders about what we should work on so that we can determine our priorities and our work plan for 2022 to 2026. So here is summary of our projects. In terms of research pipeline, the 2 projects that were widely supported by many stakeholders are a major project on intangible assets and also looking at the statement of cash flows and related matters. So it's no surprise that intangible assets came up as a high priority project. Many people commented on this. Many people commented on the existing standard, IAS 38. People also commented on things that are related to intangible assets. That might be cryptocurrencies or pollutant pricing. No, they're over there. Pollutant pricing mechanisms is over there. But people commented on things that were to do with intangible assets, the thinking about intangible assets themselves. So they might talk about cloud computing or they might have specific interests like cryptocurrency. But we're also talking about intangible assets more generally because this is so important in the environment that we're in, where many entities have their most valuable assets not in a physical form. So a lot of support for a project on intangible assets. Now, I should say, we don't know the scope of this project yet. We don't know what we're going to consider. That hasn't been determined. We haven't even begun to think about it or talk about it. We possibly start in about 2 years' time on intangible assets because we need to continue with all our other projects that I've been talking to you today about a few of those. But there are many, as you saw, and we need to finish those. We get a lot of support from stakeholders to finish our existing projects, so we must do that before we start. But when we do start, our research pipeline projects are intangible assets, and the other one is statement of cash flows. So IAS 7, we received feedback that it's a long time since we've looked at this standard. Things have changed, and there's areas that need attention. So again, we'll have to have a look at that and scope that project. In terms of climate-related risk, we've taken that on as a maintenance and consistent application project. And what that means is that we've already got some materials on this topic, and they're on our website, and our position is that there is already guidance in IFRS. There's already guidance in the accounting standards on how people should approach climate-related risk. This is if this is of interest, please have a look on our website for our materials. But what we wanted to do in this project was respond to the feedback we received from stakeholders and determine whether there's anything more that we should be looking at or doing in relation to climate-related risks. Obviously, that has some links with the work of the IASB, but here for this project, we'll be focusing on within financial statements. Now, on the right of your screen, you'll see that we have some reserve list. So these were things that many people mentioned and said that the IASB should look at. However, we just felt we did not want to overcommit in terms of capacity, that we had to be very disciplined about what we said we would work on. However, if resources become available and time becomes available, we intend to work on pollutant pricing mechanisms and also operating segments. They're our reserve projects. There were shortlisted projects that we have not added. These were the projects that were popular with some stakeholders. Some stakeholders produced arguments why we should take them on, but at this stage, the board did not decide to take them on. So we haven't begun a project on cryptocurrencies or going concern disclosures. And finally, the thing I'd like to mention is about digital financial reporting. Part of the feedback was that the IASB should slightly increase its focus on digital financial reporting. So what does that mean? Digital financial reporting can encompass at least 3 areas. It might be about the setting of IFRS accounting standards. It might be about the IFRS accounting taxonomy, which is the taxonomy used to tag financial statements to get them into digital form. Or it might be about the digital ecosystem more widely. So by the digital ecosystem, I mean all the various parties. There's the preparers, there's the tagging agencies, there's the regulators who require the digital reporting, there's repositories of information that make digital data available, there's the role of the auditors in auditing digital financial statements. So the ecosystem has lots of partners. It's not just about the IASB. So when we say there's an increase on focus on digital reporting, the question really is, in what areas should we be working? That's something to be determined. And as background to that, any research in this area is potentially of great interest to us. So when people ask for more digital reporting, we know that there are various challenges for the users of the digital reporting. There may be challenges for preparers as well, and researchers may want to look at that. But we're also interested in the challenges for users of electronic reporting, and they can relate to the lack of comparability that can come from electronic reporting because of the way the taxonomies have been used or taxonomies being different themselves. People can be challenged, users can be challenged by the use of entity-specific tagging, which means that comparability is affected. Some of the electronic reporting is not available in a usable format, and that interferes with user consumption. Our research tells us there's inconsistent availability around the world. Not all jurisdictions make the data available in the way the SEC does in the United States. We also know that in some cases there's errors in the data, there's issues around tagging. So I flag these as the sort of issues that are affecting users of digital financial reporting, and I put them up on the screen because this is an example of a lot of research opportunities. There's many people who think that digital financial reporting is the way of the future, that there's going to be an enormous amount of interest in this area because financial information is being consumed digitally and digital consumption will grow. So lots of research also in this area. So finally, to conclude my presentation, before we have time for questions, I hope, there's some examples of things that the IASB has been involved in. So we're working with national standard setters and calling for research from academics on the topic of materiality, specifically making materiality judgments, specifically relevant to our practice statement, making materiality judgments. Something else for your diary, if you're able to join us in person or virtually in New York in November 2nd to 4th. It's the conference of the IASB, the FASB, and the American Journal, the Journal of the American Accounting Association, the Accounting Review. And this is a conference with academic papers presented and they're all on the topics of leases, revenue, and financial instruments. So this is research that will feed into the post-implementation reviews that both boards are undertaking. Then looking ahead into 2023 is the IASB Research Forum. These forums come up every year. We move around the globe. This one is the European area one, and our partner journals are the European Accounting Review and Accounting in Europe. And we have intangible assets as the theme. So if you're interested in this conference and the theme, please check out all the materials on our website. Other examples of what we've done, we've been involved in special issues with journals, and this is finished now, it's a past event, but it gives you an example of what we were doing with calling for papers, meeting with the authors, working with the authors, trying to promote relevant research. And that's the slide that was up earlier with all the links, and I just remind you about our special webpage for academics. With that, I encourage you to keep abreast of what we're doing, to get involved, and I hope that we can hear from you. So I'd like to stop there, and Eduardo, if there's time for questions, I'm happy to take questions.
Perfect, Professor. And thank you so much for your brilliant presentation, and mainly for giving us a large avenue of future research projects in financial accounting. I will invite Professor Raquel Sarkis to make some comments and questions and to follow the chat. Please, Raquel.
Thank you, Eduardo. And first of all, thank you, Professor Ann Tarca, for this amazing presentation. I believe that your speech is important and very inspiring in so many ways, in so many types. And you didn't only presented several research ideas for future researchers, but you also highlighted the importance of doing accounting research that may be important to the IASB and to the financial accounting standard setters as a whole. You explained how the IASB uses accounting research, and also presented several initiatives of the IASB to bring the academy closer to the standard setters. And I believe that it is very important to academy, and academy plays an important role in this process, in this standard setting process. So thank you for this amazing presentation. I believe that everyone will leave this section with several ideas for future research, and this research will certainly improve the financial accounting research in the future. So thank you for that. I'm not sure if you have any question in the chat. Please, Rodolfo, just let me know. And for those that are here, if you would like to ask some questions, please just raise your hand. But I would like to start the discussion, Professor Ann Tarca, asking your opinion about the convergence process between the IASB and the Financial Accounting Standards Board, and what is your opinion about the progress made over the last years, and also how accounting community academic community can contribute to this process doing research related to this topic?
Raquel, I'm sorry, I'm getting a lot of echo and I can't hear your question.
Oh. Okay. You are listening now?
No, I just can't hear it. There's just too much echo in the microphone in the room.
Can you hear me now?
All right, try and ask me the question again. Have a go.
Okay. Okay. I would like to ask your opinion about the convergence process between the IASB and the Financial Accounting Standards Board, and I would like to know if.
No, Raquel, sorry, I can't. Can someone type it into the chat for me in English, and I'll have a go?
Can you hear me now? No.
I can hear you, but it's quite muffled. And so when you ask me a complicated question, I just can't hear all the words that you're saying. Just a second, please. It's very, it's because you've got a mask on as well. It's quite hard to hear. Sorry.
me better now?
Yes, much better, thank you.
Okay, thank you. My first question was related to ask your opinion about Accounting Standards Board. What's your opinion about the progress made over the time and how the academic community and accounting research could contribute to this process?
So I'll tell you what I heard. You asked me about the governance of the FASB and the IASB and how academic research could contribute to that. What sort of progress has been made? So the IASB and the FASB worked for many years on converged standards, and so IFRS 9 and leases, IFRS 16, have some areas of common. They have some differences, and then the revenue standard is completely converged standard, and that's why we were doing the PIRs together. So it's been a very positive thing that the FASB and the IASB did work together and did get those major standards with a lot of common areas, because people appreciate that there's a lot of commonality. They aren't exactly the same. And so going forward, the IASB has its particular model and stakeholders to look after, and the FASB has its concerns. So we do meet and we do speak to each other, and we do, certainly the staff and board members confer on projects and find out and so learn from each other. But I think that the two organisations are quite separate and for good reasons. But because accounting is global, we do talk to each other and we try and find common areas and learn from each other, and you know, to advance the standards. So we're watching them, they're watching us, and we're trying to get the best out of both sides. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Ann, for the explanation. My second question would be related to some papers that analyze the comment letters sent to the IASB, and most of this research that the participation of the academic community is very lower. There is a small participation of the academic community. And I would like to hear from you if you believe that we should increase participation of the academic community in this process of the ISB comment letters, or if you believe that the academic community would be more helpful doing research that may be useful to the post-implementation review.
Great question. The second. I think the academic community makes a really valuable and important contribution through the research that the community does. So the research developed to the outstanding projects, the pipeline projects, to the post-implementation reviews, that is where I believe the academics can make their major contribution. And the reason I say that is twofold. Firstly, comment letters can be about how the proposals will work in practice. So the board is looking for feedback, how the proposals will work. So that is why you expect preparers to comment and auditors to comment. And then we also seek out the users. We actively seek out the feedback of users. So in some ways, it's hard for academics to comment when they haven't got the practical experience. If they do have that, they should comment. But many of them don't have that kind of practical experience. So that where their contribution is so valuable is to do the research because of all their research skills, because of their independence, because of the way they can get the data that doesn't exist anywhere else. It's only through academics that we can get this sort of data. Very important role they have, but it isn't necessarily writing comment letters.
Thank you for this explanation, Professor Tarca. I would also like to hear from you, because during the first years of the convergence, the worldwide convergence to IFRS standards, I believe that the accounting research was concentrated on providing critical evidence about the financial and economic consequences of the adoption of a single set of high-quality accounting standards, such as those issued by the IASB. But now, after some time, I believe that the accounting research is more concentrated on evaluating the effect of specific standards that was issued by the IASB and not the process as a whole. So I would like to hear if you believe that it is still important to the IASB and to the standard setter to receive some information about the market impact of the convergence from the local standards to IFRS standards in different jurisdictions, the benefits and the costs related to this process, or we should concentrate on specific research projects?
The second one, concentrate on the specific projects, because that's where the evidence, that's where the board can use the evidence. So I agree with you. In the beginning, the academics, and I was one of them, loved to look at the impact and the global effect, from regions and countries. I would encourage everyone to look at where their comparative advantage lies. So you look into projects where you've got skills and experience that are the right ones for that project, or you're located in a country that has particular advantages. So, for example, IFRS for SMEs, you have a lot of entities in your region that use that standard. So that might be something that you investigate with a comparative advantage. You might find in a particular country that cryptos is rising, the use of crypto assets is rising. It might be an appropriate thing to investigate if it's relevant to your country. So you're always looking for comparative advantage in your work. And I think that the way ahead is around specific projects more than it is around the general studies. Because if you're trying to give evidence that's relevant to the IASB, it's much more likely to be on specific projects or indeed specific issues, such as digital financial reporting. There's elements in there that it's not a project, but it's an issue. And sometimes people will look at things like the role of regulators or enforcement. And I've mentioned disclosure as an overarching issue. And within disclosure, people might look at specific things that relate to auditors or preparers or users. Management commentary is another sort of project, but it has wide application because people will have a look at the interaction between the financial information and the non-financial information and how people are presenting and integrating the different parts to provide information that's useful. In relation to disclosure, I mentioned the words materiality, compliance, and enforcement. So they're all big issues and they are across a lot of standards. But they're all things, everything I've mentioned is something that produces evidence useful for standard setters. So there's other things that people can look at, and indeed people do. But my focus is, of course, the things that have the evidence for the standard setters. So it's more the project focus than it is the idea of looking at, the global impact. Some people will do that, but that is probably less relevant for the work of the IASB.
Thank you for this inspiring argumentation, Professor. My last comment that I would like to hear from you is about, it's not a topic directly related to the presentation, but I believe that's something that is important to IFRS Foundation by now, which is the creation of the International Sustainability Standard Board. And I would like to hear from you, how do you believe that accounting research can contribute in this process of creating a second standard board, in this process of creating the first new sustainability standards in the IASB?
The IASB is part of the IFRS Foundation and will operate with the same governance as the IASB. So when we talk about the IASB due process, where we conduct research, we determine what the problem is, we gather evidence, we assess the nature of the problem and how it might be solved, that whole process will be mirrored for the ISSB because it's the same structure. And the same process of due process and consultation will go on. So there will be opportunities for academics to contribute to the ISSB in the same way they do to the IASB. So the first area that you can contribute is to the agenda consultation. So the ISSB will very shortly be publicly consulting on what it should work on. So S1 and S2, S1 is the framework, the general framework, and S2 is the climate-related disclosures. They are responding to the feedback that the board already had on the work they should do, but now they need to decide what is next. And that is an area where academics can respond. Academics are able to look at the material about projects and consider what sort of projects they think the IASB should be working on. So that is some place that they can get involved. And then they will be able to follow the work of the board and the proposed work and do research in the same way that they do for IASB. But of course, it's very different, isn't it? Because getting the data is different. There's sustainability disclosure standards. So to research on those, you're going into different research fields. However, there's many of the same techniques that people would use in terms of interviews, so surveys, focus groups. There's the same techniques. If people are getting information from annual reports about what is disclosed, they might be hand collecting that data. They might be trying to use databases. There's all sorts of databases of sustainability information available. They might be trying to use that. So the data will be different, but it'll have some similarities to the data that gets used for IASB research. And then the techniques and the models will be very similar to what is used in other research fields. So there's much that can be taken across from IASB type work into the ISSB work. And then of course there's very rich opportunities for the connectivity, the part that's common. And I mentioned just one project, or maybe I mentioned a couple of projects, but management commentary could be a common project. Intangible assets could have both boards involved. And there's possibly a couple of other areas where the boards will work together. So academic researchers who know financial accounting are very well placed to investigate the research that's in the cross-section between. And a lot of people are calling for connected research. So that is a comparative advantage for academic accountants who already understand financial research on financial statements.
Thank you. So in summary, we have a lot of work to do in the future and a lot of research opportunity to perform in the future to contribute not only to the IASB, but also to the accounting literature as a whole. I believe that there's someone with the hands-on in the chat, in the Zoom platform. So if you could, those who are with the hand-on, please present your comment in the chat, please. I'm not sure. So, Eduardo, would you like to make some comments from you to conclude your presentation? Thank you, Professor Ann Tarca, for this amazing presentation and for these comments. It's a very nice to have you here.
You're very welcome, and thank you for inviting me to be part of your meeting, and I hope it goes very well today and you enjoy it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Professor Ann. Just would like to thank you once again and ask for our online participants that if you want to make some questions or comments, please type in the chat, please. So I suppose we don't have any further questions, and thank you so much for your presentation. Once again, I'd like to invite everyone to thank you. Have a good night.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Muito obrigado a todos. Nós pedimos desculpas pelas intermitências de áudio. Ainda estamos aprendendo com esse formato híbrido, mas certamente vamos corrigindo à medida que os problemas vão surgindo. Muito obrigado. E agora nós temos a continuidade das atividades com as sessões paralelas, né? Muito obrigado. Bom dia a todos.
coisa, mas... Não, estava aqui no celular. Por quê? Ah, talvez no começo estava aqui, pode ser. Talvez o celular estava perto aqui, não sei se está